You know what's funny? We spend so much time trying to make someone see our worth, especially someone who pulled away, someone avoidant, someone who made us feel like we were too much. But here's the truth: you will never get an avoidant person to apologize by chasing them. You get their apology the moment you stop needing it. Let me explain. An avoidant person runs from emotional responsibility not because they're cruel, but because closeness makes them feel exposed. They don't know how to hold intimacy without feeling trapped. So they pull back, they go silent, they minimize, and we, the ones who care, we try to explain ourselves, prove our good intentions, fix the distance. But here's the paradox: the more you try to convince them, the more they feel confirmed in their fear. That emotions are overwhelming, that connection means pressure. So what do? Instead, you disengage with grace, not coldly, not in revenge, but with quiet self-respect. You stop arguing for your value. You stop performing calmness to win them back. You simply start living in your truth. I wanted closeness. You weren't ready. That's okay. But I won't shrink to make you comfortable. Do this and watch what happens. When you no longer feed the emotional chase, they finally have to face the silence inside themselves, not the silence between you. That's when reflection begins. That's when remorse hits. That's when the apology comes, not because you demanded it, but because your dignity made them see the gap between your peace and their fear. And maybe they'll reach out. Maybe they'll say, "I'm sorry," or maybe they won't. But you'll realize something powerful: you didn't need an apology to feel whole. You just needed to remember that your value was never up for negotiation. Don't chase clarity, embody it. When someone pulls away, especially an avoidant person, the first instinct is to demand answers. We start asking questions like, "What happened? Did I do something wrong? Can we talk about this?" But clarity doesn't always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from composure. When you are grounded in your truth, when you know who you are and what you feel, you stop chasing people for explanations that won't satisfy you anyway. Chasing clarity from someone who avoids emotional depth is like trying to get warmth from someone standing in the cold. It's not that they're unwilling. It's that they don't know how. True clarity begins when you start embodying the peace you wish they could give you. It's a shift from "I need to understand them" to "I understand myself." You begin to see that their silence, their distance, their hesitation, it's not about your worth, it's about their capacity. And when you stop personalizing their avoidance, you stop feeding the anxiety loop that keeps you stuck. You move from reaction to observation, from pleading to presence. That's where your power lies. When you embody clarity, your energy changes. You stop sending mixed signals. Instead of trying to decode their behavior, you state your boundaries without drama. "I'm not okay being in something that feels uncertain." You don't say it to manipulate them into choosing you. You say it because that's your truth. You stop needing to convince anyone that your feelings are valid. You stop trying to rescue the connection by losing yourself in it. You become someone who chooses peace over panic, alignment over attachment. And something fascinating happens when you do that. People start responding to the calmness you project. The avoidant, who once felt suffocated by your emotional intensity, now feels the stability of your presence. They can sense that you're no longer grasping for control, and that creates space. Emotional safety isn't built when you chase someone. It's built when you stop making their response the source of your peace. To embody clarity also means being honest with yourself about what you need. If you want consistency, admit it. If you need communication, own it. Don't pretend you're fine with crumbs when your soul craves depth. The more you deny your needs, the more you betray your own clarity. Embodying clarity doesn't mean pretending to be detached. It means standing firmly in what's true for you, even if that truth creates distance. It's about showing, not telling, what alignment looks like. You don't need to announce your boundaries loudly. You live them quietly. You stop explaining why you're stepping back. You stop waiting for closure. You understand that the most powerful form of communication is energy, not words. When you are clear, your actions, tone, and silence all send the same message. I know who I am, and I know what I deserve. Clarity isn't given, it's claimed. And when you claim it, you stop chasing people for validation. You stop analyzing their every move. You start trusting that whatever is meant for you won't be confused about you. When you embody that truth, you no longer need them to define the connection. You already have. Detach with dignity. Those three words hold immense strength, especially when dealing with someone who constantly pulls away, leaves you guessing, or shuts down when emotions arise. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop losing yourself in the process of caring. It's not about becoming cold or heartless. It's about choosing peace over chaos, choosing self-respect over constant anxiety. Detaching with dignity is the art of stepping back gracefully, without resentment, without begging, and without turning your pain into performance. When someone avoids emotional responsibility, our instinct is often to close the gap. We text more, call again, explain harder, and try to prove we're not a threat. But every time you do that, you tell them, without words, that their withdrawal controls your emotional state. The truth is, real power lies in the pause. When you detach with dignity, you stop feeding the cycle that keeps you both trapped in imbalance. You give space not as punishment, but as permission for both of you to breathe, to reflect, and to see things clearly. Detaching with dignity means saying to yourself, I don't have to fight to be seen. You understand that if someone can only value you when you're silent or distant, then their connection to you was never about depth, it was about control. And when you reclaim your energy, you break that dynamic. You stop seeking their approval and start investing that energy into your self-worth. You realize that your emotions are valid, but they don't have to be performed for someone who isn't ready to meet you halfway. The beauty of dignified detachment is that it changes the energy between you and the other person. Instead of reacting to their inconsistency, you respond with calm boundaries. You stop making grand emotional statements. You no longer chase closure or try to make them understand your heart. You give them the gift of your absence, which speaks louder than any words ever could. You stop trying to convince someone who is emotionally unavailable to show up differently. Instead, you show up differently. You show up for yourself, and that's the thing they notice. When you stop over-explaining, stop checking in, stop filling every silence with effort, the avoidant person begins to feel something they're not used to, the weight of your composure. Your grace becomes a mirror. It reflects back to them how much chaos they've created and how much peace you've chosen. That awareness often becomes the first spark of remorse the moment they begin to see what they've lost. But the point isn't to make them apologize. The point is to rise above the cycle of reaction and reclaim your sense of self. Dignity is silent but powerful. It doesn't need validation to exist. When you detach with it, you're saying, I value myself enough to walk away from confusion. You don't need to slam doors or send long messages. You just exit the stage with calm certainty. And in doing so, you regain control over the only thing that was ever truly yours, your peace. Stop arguing for your worth. It's one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially when you care deeply about someone who constantly makes you feel unseen. When you love an avoidant person, your natural instinct is to explain yourself, to make them understand that your intentions are good, that your emotions aren't attacks, and that your need for connection doesn't mean you're needy. But the more you argue for your worth, the more you give away your power. Because your worth was never meant to be debated, it was meant to be demonstrated through the way you treat yourself. Arguing for your worth sounds like endless justifications. I didn't mean it that way. I just wanted to talk. I'm not trying to pressure you. You start explaining emotions that are perfectly normal, hoping that if they finally understand, they'll stop pulling away. But the truth is, understanding isn't the issue. Emotional capacity is. You can't make someone love you correctly by proving you're lovable. You can't teach someone how to respect you by showing them how patient you can be with their disrespect. When you stop arguing for your worth, something shifts inside you. You begin to realize that the more energy you spend defending your character, the less energy you have left to live in alignment with it. You start to see that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from standing firm even when you're misunderstood. The people who are meant for you won't need a dissertation to see your value. They'll feel it through your consistency, your authenticity, your self-respect. It's important to remember that validation isn't love. When you chase validation, you give someone else the power to define how lovable you are. But love rooted in fear will always keep you small. Every time you explain why you deserve to be treated better, you're essentially asking for permission to exist as you are. And that's not love, that's survival. You deserve relationships where your emotional depth isn't seen as a threat, but as a gift. So instead of arguing, you start embodying your worth. You stop trying to fix conversations that were never meant to be fixed. You let your actions become your language. You say less, you prove less, and you simply FB more. You allow silence to say what words never could, that you're no longer available for connections that require you to shrink. The right people won't make you feel like you're too emotional, too expressive, or too much. They'll meet you where you are and appreciate that you care enough to show up. Arguing for your worth is exhausting because it keeps you dependent on the one thing you can't control, someone else's perception. True peace comes when you stop trying to convince anyone that you're worthy of love, respect, or effort. You just start living like you already are, and that quiet confidence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. When you stop arguing for your worth, the avoidant person finally sees what you knew all along, that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. Let silence do the talking. In a world where everyone is quick to explain, defend, or justify, silence becomes a language of power. Especially when you're dealing with someone avoidant, someone who retreats, who shuts down emotionally, who disappears when things get too real. Your silence speaks volumes. It's not a tool for manipulation, it's a mirror. It reflects truth without distortion. When words no longer reach them, silence becomes the most eloquent statement you can make. When you stop chasing communication, you allow space for awareness. The avoidant often thrives in chaos because it distracts from accountability. The moment you stop feeding that dynamic with explanations or emotional outbursts, the pattern breaks. They're used to you reacting, to your voice filling the gaps, to your messages bridging the distance. But when you choose silence, they lose that familiar rhythm. It's unsettling at first because silence exposes what noise hides their own discomfort, their own guilt, their own unresolved emotions. Silence, when used with self-respect, is an avoidance. It's clarity. It says, I've said enough. Now it's your turn to step up. It removes the pressure from you to fix or persuade. You stop trying to make them see the pain they caused. You stop rehearsing what you'll say next to make them understand. You realize that the most profound impact often comes from restraint. When you no longer argue, plead, or explain, you show emotional maturity that demands reflection. The avoidant who once ran from intensity is now confronted by the intensity of your calm. There's something incredibly powerful about quiet energy. It unsettles people who relied on your emotional effort to maintain control. When you fall silent, they finally feel the absence of your presence, the energy they once took for granted. Silence gives them space to miss you, but more importantly, it gives you space to heal. It allows you to separate your emotions from their behavior, to see things as they are rather than how you wish they were. It's in silence that you regain perspective, that your self-worth finds its voice again. Choosing silence doesn't mean you suppress your feelings, it means you redirect them. Instead of expressing them outwardly to someone who's not listening, you channel them inward to reflection, growth, and self-awareness. You write, you breathe, you grieve, but you don't beg. Because silence isn't about winning, it's about restoring your own balance. It's about stepping back from the noise of confusion and realizing that peace was never lost, it was just buried under the need to be heard. When silence becomes your answer, the dynamic shifts completely. The avoidant no longer has emotional cues to respond to, no arguments to deflect, no explanations to manipulate. All that's left is the weight of their own conscience. That's when apologies happen, not because you demanded one, but because your silence made them face themselves. Sometimes the most healing sound in a broken relationship isn't a conversation. It's the silence that follows when you finally decide to stop explaining your worth. Peace is power. It's easy to mistake peace for passivity, as if being calm means you've given up. But true peace is not about surrendering. It's about reclaiming control over your emotional state. When you deal with someone avoidant, someone who withdraws or deflects when things get real, chaos can become addictive. The roller coaster of connection and disconnection can pull you in, making you feel like peace is something that depends on their behavior. But the moment you realize peace is an internal choice, not a reaction to someone else, everything changes. Peace is not about pretending you don't care. It's about caring in a way that doesn't destroy your balance. It's the ability to hold compassion without losing boundaries. When you're at peace, you don't need to prove your value through confrontation. You don't need to win arguments or demand closure. You understand that the loudest statement you can make is stillness. Peace doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop fighting what is. You stop trying to change people who are not ready to meet you, and you focus instead on mastering your own energy. When you choose peace over reaction, you shift from victim to creator. The avoidant may try to pull you into their cycle of silence and re-engagement, testing if they still have emotional control. But peace disarms that pattern. When you stop matching their inconsistency with your urgency, you become untouchable. They can withdraw, ignore, or delay, but you remain centered. That's the kind of energy that commands respect because it can't be manipulated. You're no longer chasing their validation, you're radiating self-assurance. Peace is also magnetic. People feel drawn to someone who doesn't react out of desperation. Your calm presence highlights the instability of their behavior. The avoidant, used to chaos and emotional highs, begins to feel safe in your steadiness. They start to see what emotional maturity looks like. That's often when reflection begins, when guilt softens into understanding, and understanding transforms into apology. But here's the irony: by the time they're ready to say sorry, you no longer need it to feel whole, because peace already gave you closure. Choosing peace also means letting go of the fantasy of control. You stop replaying every moment in your head, trying to figure out what you could have said differently. You accept that people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. And that realization brings a quiet kind of freedom. You don't chase closure, you create it. You don't demand love, you embody it. Your peace becomes the boundary that protects your heart from being dragged into emotional survival mode. The truth is, peace is the highest form of strength. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, and it doesn't need recognition. It's that moment when you finally exhale, when you stop overthinking and simply let things be. It's the calm in your chest when you realize that no one's behavior can take away your stability unless you hand it to them. And when you reach that point, when your peace no longer depends on their apology, that's when real power begins. In the end, remember that healing isn't about changing the avoidant. It's about changing the way you show up for yourself. When you stop chasing clarity, detach with dignity, stop arguing for your worth, let silence speak and protect your peace, you rise into a version of yourself that no longer seeks validation but radiates self-respect. And it's from that quiet strength that genuine apologies, reconnections, and new beginnings are born. Thank you all for listening, for showing up for your growth, and for choosing to love yourselves enough to walk with grace, even when it's hard.